All right, guys on Zoom, appreciate you guys being here too as well. So we're here to talk about 4 strategies to get your buyers and sellers off the fence. Okay. Martin Mesa, why don't you come on, join me up here? Sure. Welcome to the Coldwell Banker Dynasty. We have a really cool treat. And then we have a back-to-back training at 1:30 with Cindy Chang, who has a legal presentation regarding, just getting implicit bias, things that we may unconsciously say that could potentially be discriminatory. And we want to, as realtors, we face a lot of the public. We face buyers. We go to open houses. We face tenants. We definitely need to be, in our mind, consciously aware of the areas that avoid discriminatory remarks or any implicit bias against them. So if you don't know what that is, you're in a special treat. Make sure you stick around at 1:30. Martin,
Yes,
how are we doing today?
I'm good. I had some food. I had some pastrami pizza
Okay,
for the first time in my life
first time?
with mustard on it. It was good.
These agents are spoiled. They get this every 2 months. They'll have some sort of pizza cart. It's definitely a very unique, but very flavorful, tasteful pizza. And it has a lot of calories. So I hope you guys can
Because we're an agency that cares and an agency with what?
with a lot of.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know Martin's gonna get his drink. We'll get started today. The rates, when I last checked with the Fed, in terms of finance and everything like that, they said they were gonna do 3 rate reductions in 2024. I find that hard to happen because inflation still is not in control. So we are going to expect elevated rates for longer, is what the Fed is saying. Wait, maybe want to expand on that, Martin, and talk about the 4 strategies?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kelvin.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Let me-
Okay, I want to share a fun fact about Martin. I don't know if Kelvin knows this. But Martin is Dominican Republican and he is also
Cuban.
Cuban. So those of you that have ever had any Cuban food, it's amazing. Cuban food is amazing. So thank you for being here. And another fun fact is he's been to Temecula, guys.
Yeah, I've never been to Temecula. I understand some people here have some really close ties to the area. And I've always wanted to go see and visit that wine country there, but I haven't made it yet. I've done a lot of loads for people that have bought property out there. I'm surprised I actually haven't been out there to see their houses, but
But another fun fact that is no one knows here except for me and Martin and Cindy. Cindy 10 years ago referred me a customer to buy a property. And these people bought an Alhambra property, a condominium. Turned out I met Martin via that referral. And he was the lender for Eric and Liz.
yeah, I remember Eric. Yeah.
So it was very cool, very smooth escrow. They got a great deal on their condominium, it was 2,000 square feet. And now I'm sure they're enjoying all that equity. But anyway, Martin, you have the
Yeah,
floor.
I remember that. That was it 10 years ago?
About 10 years.
My gosh.
No, that was not a secret. I knew that one because Martin shared it with me.
Well, I have a presentation. First of all, thank you, Kelvin and Sylvia for having me speak today. I do have printouts of my slides in case anybody wants to write notes. As I go along, there's a section if you want to write some notes. So does anybody want some of these? Oh, okay, I'll pass them out. Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah. Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay. So, I was talking to Kelvin about doing a presentation here and I brought up this topic. And he thought, wow, that's a great one for us right now. So I figured I already got this presentation ready. This is a presentation I had put together for my own office about 3 months ago. And I figured it's pretty much relevant to the real estate professional as well. This presentation was, I own a mortgage company here in Sierra Madre. So the presentation I had put together was really for my loan officers, because we found that we were constantly being talked, our clients were constantly expressing the same concerns about whether or not they should buy or sell their properties right now. And more from a mortgage perspective, but I think it just goes hand in hand with the real estate side, because I think you guys probably hear the same objections from people that you're out there talking to, that you're possibly gonna help buy a house or sell a house for. So, the presentation is about 3 or 4 months old, so some of the data in there is from last year, but it hasn't changed much, so hopefully it'll be okay. It's still relevant. As you can see, this presentation was created in December of 2023. But anyway, let's get right to it. And if you guys have any questions as I'm going through it, just don't hesitate to raise your hand. So, okay, so my presentation is helping buyers and sellers overcome fear and anxiety with facts. And good information, correct, right information. So this is a chart that it's actually from December 2023. It showed that, and again, this presentation is from a mortgage perspective. It showed that mortgage originations wound up declining approximately 20% in 2023. Compared to even the year before, which was 2022, which compared to 2021 and 2020 was an even huger steep decline. So it just paints a picture that over the last couple of years, after the rise up in prices that were kind of spurred on by the low interest rates and other factors, we had a steep turnaround in mortgage originations. And we see that today when we're out there talking to people that are looking to buy or sell. And we know why the numbers are down. It's because people are just not ready to make a move. And then there's inventory issues and so forth. But the numbers tell us that there's been a huge decrease in demand for mortgages. Huge decrease. So why is that? I mean, there's obviously a lot of reasons why. But I'm going to talk about a couple of the reasons why I think it's a big factor. So the number 4, there's 4 reasons that I'm going to be talking about today. And the first reason, the first challenge people face in today's market is they have, like Kelvin said, there's a reluctance to give up the low interest rate that they might already have on their current loan. I mean, most people that got a loan in 2020, 2021, their rate is probably 3% or less. Some people are in the 2s. I mean, I think I did a loan once for one guy. He got a 15-year fix. I think his rate was like 1.75. I remember that. Yes, I got him a rate. It was a 15-year fix. It was like at the all-time lows. It was like early 2021.
Wow.
And I think he might have paid a point for it, but still, it was.
So Martin, is that like a huge achievement as a lender to be able to give a loan like that to someone?
I mean, for me, it was just like any other loan,
Well, what I'm saying is, I know some physicians are like, whoa, I helped give birth to 7, babies. So for lenders, it's not like a big wow.
It is for me, it was a milestone, right? I don't think I've ever gotten anybody an interest rate under 2%. That was the one time I actually did that. So for me, it'll always be embedded in my memory forever. I mean, maybe at some point when I get old, I'll forget, but I mean, 1.75 was the rate he got. So I don't know if I'll ever be able to get somebody a rate that low ever again. So it was a huge milestone for me,
But I bet that client will never forget you.
I still talk to him. I still talk to him on a regular basis.
You'll never sell.
He's like, I'm not refinancing, Martin, why are you calling me? I'm not refinancing.
Yeah, well, luckily, he's so happy at the rate I got him, he still calls me, because he
Yeah.
does buy and sell and stuff,
Sure.
and he always calls me for my opinion or to get a quote. So,
That's awesome.
it was one of them things where we just locked the rate in on the perfect day, and it just worked out perfectly. I mean, all the stars aligned, which, rarely ever happens in a real estate transaction. But on his particular transaction, it did work out that way. So anyway, going back to the thing is. Most people have such low rates on their loan that they're just reluctant to give it up. They don't want to pay off that loan and get into a new loan at the current rates of 6 or 7%. It's a psychological step back, so to speak. Well, not psychological, it's, you know, realistically, in terms of interest, it's a step back, and people don't like to take a step back. But sometimes you got to take a step back to take 2 steps forward, so we're gonna get into that. The other reason we hear a lot of people having concerns about making a move, whether it's buying or selling, is they're just like Kelvin said, they're waiting for interest rates to come down. And that's legitimate. I mean, the Federal Reserve is eventually probably going to lower the rates. They were planning to lower them as early as next month, but with the recent inflation figures that have come out and the low unemployment, it doesn't look like they're going to be doing that. So we might have to be waiting a little bit longer than what we originally thought for rates to come down. And some people are waiting for both interest rates and housing prices to come down. They're waiting for both things, right? I'm not gonna buy until rates go down and house prices come down. So I've heard that too.
They'll wait forever.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I know. And you know
people-
what, Martin, there's also buyers that'll say, I wanna know what the elections are gonna be like. Or I wanna know what our market is gonna crash, or King Kong is coming next year.
yeah,
No, King Kong already came, he's at the theaters.
yeah. I've heard that one a lot. I've heard that one recently, you know, the gentleman I had worked on pre-approving for a home purchase loan, he's a first time buyer, and he sure enough, he told me, I'm gonna wait and see what happens with the economy in the world.
Yeah.
And that was just earlier this year. And honestly, I didn't know how to answer that. So that's part of the reason why I, you know, started referring to this presentation. And then number 4 thing I want to highlight is there's just a hesitancy, and this has always been the case. This is nothing new to our current market, but there's always been a hesitancy for buyers to pay over what the seller's asking for the property. Hesitancy to pay for over asking price. So number one, the number one thing that people hear, that we hear, is they're reluctant to give up a low rate and move up, right? Move up to a nicer home, relocate, downsize, upgrade, whatever the reason is for moving, buying another home. There's always good reasons for it. Whatever the reason is, they're reluctant because the thought of them losing that 2.5% rate on the loan that they got 3 years ago, they just can't wrap their minds around that. They just think that would be a stupid move, right? Why would I start borrowing at 7% if I could continue borrowing at 2% or 3%? And that, you know, in and of itself, it's a legitimate argument. I can't argue against that. The numbers are what they are. But when people tell you that, this is what I've tried to train myself to tell them. And we're not trying to change their mind. At least I'm not when I talk to them. I'm just trying to help them see other things that maybe they haven't been considering. Because a lot of these decisions, you know, whether they should buy or sell, they're not one dimensional. I mean, usually there's a lot of factors involved that they have to consider. You know, there's going to be some pros, there's going to be some cons. But if you focus on just the cons and you don't also consider the pros, your decisions are not very well informed. So what we're doing is we're trying to better inform them so that they have the whole picture of what they should be considering when they're making a decision on whether or not to make a move. So, and this is just one example. This doesn't apply to everybody. But one thing you can tell somebody in that boat, again, not everybody is in this situation, but one thing we often see, and these are national numbers, by the way, these aren't specific to Southern California, but Southern California is probably no different. The numbers are probably just higher. But the average homeowner, and this again in America, back about 3 months ago, had about roughly $275,000 in equity in their home. And I'm sure here in California, it's even much higher than that. And then the average household had about, believe it or not, $96,000 in consumer debt. That's a high number. That could be credit card debt, that could be auto loans, that could be student loans, whatever it is. That's a lot of debt. So the average homeowner has more than enough equity to pay off all that high interest consumer debt. Usually it's high interest, right? Credit cards are, usually 18%. And then the other thing is that you can also tell people about the rate is, since 1971, the average mortgage rates has been 7.75%. It's been almost 8%. That's the average for the past 50 some odd years. So you got to bring that interest rate debate back into reality, back into perspective. Okay, the rates are higher now, but historically speaking, they're right on par with the average that we've seen over the past 50 years. So when I'm talking to somebody like this, I'm like, okay, you have all this consumer debt, you have all this equity. Let's forget about the interest rate you'd be losing, and let's talk about, does it make sense to sell your house, pay off all that high interest consumer debt with your proceeds, and use the difference towards a down payment on a new home? Would that put you in a better position than you are now? Not only financially, but your entire lifestyle, there are always reasons why we want to move. We want another bedroom, we want a bigger yard, we want to be in a better school district, we want to be closer to work. There's all of these reasons. So don't just consider, the interest rate change. Think about all the benefits that you'd get if you did make that move, that on all these other factors does make sense for you and your whole household and your quality of life. So let's look at that. Do you have consumer debt that maybe you're drowning in, and you're just basically living paycheck to paycheck to make those car payments, make those credit card payments, make those student loans payments, make those home equity line and loan payments, all that stuff. So, and then you're gonna have to show them the numbers. You're gonna have to show them the numbers that if they pay off all this consumer debt, if they sell their house, look how much better cash flow position you'll be when you buy a house. Even if your mortgage is gonna be at 6.5% or 7% at the new house. Look at the numbers. You gotta compare it both ways. And sometimes when you explain all that to them, a light bulb goes off in their head, because it's something they haven't necessarily thought about. Some people have, and they've considered it and they've weighed it, but this is always a good thing to bring up, especially if they have a lot of consumer debt, student loans, home equity lines or loans, auto loans, credit cards, that sort of thing, any kind of consumer debt. Because once you start taking into account the high interest on that, exchanging an 18% credit card interest rate for, a 7% mortgage loan may actually be a beneficial thing if you look at the whole picture. So does anybody have any questions on that? Does that kind of make sense to people?
Yes.
I think you should add actually one more solution argument for that situation. So he talked about the payments and the debt. What you're forgetting is, like any stock, there's realized gains and unrealized gains, right? We have $275,000 worth of equity in the home, and they've never had an exercise their ability to claim their 2 out of the last 5 years primary residence capital gains exclusion. So that 274,000 for a single person, that 250,000 is completely excluded from gains, not non-taxable. For a married couple, that full amount of equity would be able to be realized for up to 500,000 in equity. So if they're never ever exercising their option to do this, because they could roll this and do this every 5-10 years if they really wanted to keep claiming that homeowners exemption, capital gains exclusion. So that's a great reason to basically get all this money tax-free. Okay, but if they stay in their home, they're never going to realize it.
Yeah. That's a great point, that primary residence, 2 out of the last 5 years, capital gains exclusion, 250 or 500 for a married couple. Yeah, that's amazing. I'm glad you reminded me of that, because I forget to even tell people that.
And then if they're older people, the argument they would have is I'm afraid of my next property tax payments. My property tax basis is so low here. I'm happy because of my low tax rate. Many of you guys should advise and consult and educate your clients. You can transfer that tax basis to any property they purchase replacement in California. Okay, so those are arguments that are now being defeated by you, because you can point them with the language of prop, is
It
it
used to be
eight?
Prop
It
13.
used to be prop 60 and 90,
Mhm.
but now it's for the olders above 55 years old. I think I have to look it up, but then it's in there. I've sent it out to you guys. Okay, so that transfer of tax basis is another huge reason to keep their low tax rate. Okay,
And how old do you have to be to, is it 59 or 55?
55 plus. Nancy, do you know what it was? I forgot.
65, 55.
55 plus,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and then now you can, before it's lower, same price or lower, when, with the same, when you buy, it has to be the same price or lower than the ones you sell. Now you can buy higher.
Yep. You can buy higher, just pay the difference on the greater than the
And
sales price.
also the whole LA, whole California,
Helen,
How long they have to change it,
within 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
You can sell first and buy 2 years later, you can
buy
buy and then sell 2
and
years later.
within 2 years?
Yeah.
Yes.
okay,
Yeah, that's great. So property tax transfer basis for 55 and over, and obviously no capital gains to pay if it's been your primary residence for 2 out of the last 5 years. Those are huge. Huge reasons to bring up to people that maybe haven't thought about those things, because those are other compelling reasons to, make a move if the move makes sense for you. Number 2 reason is they're just waiting for, that we hear on our end as mortgage people, is they're kind of waiting for mortgage interest rates to come down. They don't know how far down. They don't know, what's the magic number for them to come down. They just think they're too high and they want them to come down, but they haven't really thought about it. So if the purpose for holding off on it is for rates to come down, okay, let's look at that. Like, well, how far down would it have to go in order for it to make sense, So you can get into that with them. But I don't even get that specific with them. What I've been talking to people about is I just give them an example of an actual transaction to let them know that, yes, interest rate is important and you have to be able to afford your monthly payment and all that. Yes, is true. But again, let's look at the bigger picture. So the average home price in LA County, and this was, late last year, was about 841,000. And by the way, that national number is about 416,000, but in LA County is about 840 and some odd change thousand. So let's look at an example of $1 million sales price with just 20% down. If the loan you're getting for that money you're borrowing, if the rate that you get on that loan drops from just 7% to 6%, which is a huge drop, it's a 1-point drop in rate. The monthly payment on that loan will be about $526 a month less at the lower rate of 6% versus what it would be at 7%. That's a lot, $526 a month, which equates to about $6,300 a year, 526 times 12. And that's a simplified calculation because we're not taking into account, the mortgage interest deduction and stuff like that. But you're roughly saving about $6,300 a year by getting a lower rate. So if you're waiting around for rates to go from 7 to 6, who knows how long you'll be waiting. But if you don't wait, if you do wait, and eventually you'll save $6,300 when you get there. In the meantime, while you're waiting, the average national appreciation rate over the next 12 months is expected to be about 5.8%. This is a national average, of course. And so for $1 million home, you're going to experience about $58,000 in home appreciation in just 12 months, assuming that national average appreciation rate. So you're waiting around to save 6,300 a year. And in the meantime, you're losing potentially 58,000 a year in lost appreciation on that $1 million home, assuming the expected average appreciation rate holds. So does that make sense? You're trying to save 6,300, but you're going to be losing 58,000. Obviously, it doesn't make sense. So for this buyer, on this example, if they just bought now, assuming these appreciation rates hold and the interest rates don't go down, which I don't think they're going to be going down anytime soon, that buyer you just saved your client 51,000. Their net worth just went up 51,000 in 1 year if they would have bought by the appreciation. The appreciation of a property, especially at the high prices here in California, it's just a huge wealth creator for people. And they've got to take that into perspective when they're talking about a little bit of a higher payment because the interest rate is higher. You got to remember that, yeah, you're paying a little more interest, but the appreciation on your home is most likely going to completely outpace whatever you're losing in interest you're paying on that money you're borrowing. If these appreciation rates hold. So when I show people this, some people have already thought about that. Some people are more analytical than others, but a lot of people don't think about these things. They just have it in their head that rates are too high because of what they've heard in the news or what their friends have told them. Sorry. Let me turn my phone off.
Good sign for the rest of you guys too, to put it on volume, mute.
Oh, it was on mute, but I've got my Bluetooth thing connected to my computer. Let me turn that off too. So yeah, they always have to look at, okay, if I buy a house now, how much additional wealth will I create for myself? Just by having a property, I don't have to do anything. It's just going to naturally go up in value through just appreciation. So weigh that or balance that with whatever interest you're going to have to pay in additional rate that you're, going to have to pay compared to what you think the rate should be. So this is another way to talk to people and actually show them numbers that will make sense to people.
I mean, just to expand on that, Martin. Yes, they're gonna expect 4.85% maybe appreciation year over year. And that's not gonna change. That real estate has been following that long-term trend. The payment of 7% or whatever they're at, the high rates, that can change at any time. So if the rates drop next year, they can reduce that payment. So the spread only further increases because the borrower can always choose to rent to refinance when it cools off down to 5 or 5.5 or whatever. So that's the other thing to think about it. The problem of those who are on the fence waiting for rates to drop and then they'll buy. The key difference is if they're jumping back in the fence at that time, that's also when all the other borrowers and buyers who are looking to shop around will also be looking to buy too when the rates go down 5 or 5.25. So then you have greater competition. You're going to have multiple offers. You're going to have another situation of the 2021 pandemic where everyone's going 200 over asking price. It's crazy. So do you want to be in that situation of paying 200,000 over the asking price just to get the property? And the rates are now more affordable for you at 5.5, but the loan amount is much greater. It doesn't make any sense, right? So you rather shop when there's less buyers out there. You buy when there's the most fear. That's when you seize the best deals. You know me, right, Meg?
Yeah.
When the greatest fear, when everyone's selling, that's when you buy. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, and one thing that I remember hearing this when I first got in the mortgage industry like 22 years ago was we used to say this to people back then, and I still say it to people. I say, marry the property, date the rate, right? It's perfect, right?
Perfect.
Right.
Once you buy a property, you're married to that property until you get divorced and sell it or whatever. But the rate, I mean, as the interest rate fluctuates downward, you're just dating that rate. And I'm like, man, you don't look as good as this new, you know, rate looks. I'm just gonna get rid of you and go with this rate, you know?
Unless it's a 1.75.
Yeah. I mean, unless it's a 1.75,
That's a
but
keeper.
in this
Yeah,
market,
yeah.
I mean, you get a rate at 7%, and probably in a year or two, you could probably lower that to 6% when the rates eventually come down. And doing a refinance is not that difficult. I mean, it's pretty simple process. It's nothing like buying a property. It's a lot easier to get that process done. And it's a lot less costly to a refinance. You can do a refinance with no closing costs, believe it or not. I've done many of those in my life, and just lowered people's rate from, well, in the past years, I'd lower it from 4 to 3, from 3 to 2, with like a couple $1,000 in closing costs, and it's done like that. It's very easy and their payment goes down. So it's easy to get that lower rate once the rates do go down. Yes.
It's a quick question on those refinance. So is the fees for refinancing depending on the gaps of the rates lower? Or what's the based on
There's always closing costs when you do a loan, a refinance loan. There's escrow fees, title fees, appraisal, lender fees, credit.
okay,
So there's costs. But the lender, whoever you do the loan with, will say, okay, if you don't want to pay any closing costs, we'll pay them for you. But we're going to give you a higher interest rate on your loan. Because the lender makes more money on the loan, the higher interest rate they charge. So they could say, okay, if you don't want to pay these closing costs, instead of a 5% rate, we'll give you a 5.25% rate. And then you don't have to cover any we'll cover all the costs for you. It's called a no closing cost, no point, no cost loan. So that's all they're doing. They're just saying, okay, you don't want to pay costs? That's fine, but we can't give you that lower rate. We have to slightly bump the rate up. And for some people, that's fine. They'd rather take a slightly higher rate and not pay any closing costs. So that's how that works. Does that answer your question?
yeah, so I just want to know how much the closing costs compared to the original.
Oh, yeah. So on a refinance, let's say for $500,000 loan, you're probably gonna be somewhere around 3,000 in closing costs. Escrow, title, appraisal, lender fees, county recording, notary, credit report, all that stuff, right around $3,000. Now, if it's a $5 million loan, then those closing costs are higher because the title insurance is going to be more, the appraisal is going to be more and stuff like that. But for anything $1 million or less, you're probably looking at about, again, assuming about 3,000, and that's assuming the buyer doesn't want to pay points.
Oh.
Points are additional fees that a bank charges to get an even lower rate. So, but if you're not paying points, about $2,500 to $3,000 in closing costs is what you could expect to pay for a typical refinance loan.
Less than $1 million.
Yeah. Even if it's over $1 million, it's not gonna be that much more than that, because some of those things are based on the loan amount. So the title insurance goes up as the loan goes. So some of those costs go up a little bit as the loan amount increases.
And again, that's including, closing cost means everything, right? Escrow, title, everything.
Yeah, escrow fees, title fees, whatever the lender charges, the appraisal fee, county recording, notary, credit report, third-party stuff. That's pretty much it. There's really not much else to it than that. Those are the typical people that charge closing costs. Somewhere around there, $3,500 at the most,
Thank
Is
you.
that, yeah. So it's not a lot of money compared. And by the way, you don't have to pay that out of pocket when you refinance. When you buy a house, you have to pay the closing costs out of pocket. But when you refinance, you don't necessarily have to pay it out of pocket. Most people just finance it into the new loan. You can pay it out of pocket if you want. If you do, it's 100% tax deductible that year. But most people just roll it into the new loan. So that's a good question. Anybody have any other questions about this? So yeah, home appreciation will always, it's not a guarantee, but it will pretty much almost always outpace whatever additional interest you might have to pay because of higher interest. That's always a good question to ask them. Okay, well, what does the rate have to go down to in order for it to make sense for you to buy? And if they say, okay, I want it to go down to 5%, then you can have your loan officer do the numbers for them and say, okay, right now it's 7. If you wait till it's 5, this is how much you're gonna save in interest. But in the meantime, this is how much you're gonna be losing in home value if the house appreciates at 5.8% over the next year or whatever. Right? And they see those numbers, and then it's something that they haven't thought about necessarily. And when they see that, they say, okay, well, if I look at the big picture, maybe it does make sense to buy a house now, even though the interest is gonna be a little higher. So that's a good way to talk to people about that. Number 3, let me check time. Okay, got 15 minutes, so number 3 there, we already talked about this, but one of the things we hear often is, I'm waiting for house prices to come down. I mean, they're still thinking that what happened in 2008 is gonna somehow happen again sometime. You know, what happened in 2008, which was everything that caused that, none of that is pretty much in play this time around. For the most part, none of that stuff is really happening right now. What caused the crash in 2008 really isn't something that could cause a crash now. So in case you didn't know that's different right now. So anyway, this is for me, the most compelling thing in this whole presentation is that since 1942, home values, and these are national figures, home values have gone up 73 times, 73 years. And only 7 out of those years since 1942 have the home values gone down. So 73 times, 73 years, we had a positive. Only 7 times we had a negative on home values. And then one time it was a 0% change, which is pretty crazy. So American real estate is, it's a champion. I mean, it's a champ. It hardly ever loses. And when it does get knocked down, it gets back up. It gets back up and fights, just like a championship boxer. It is a champ. And right now, inventory is down 38%. Again, this is a national number compared to 2019. So we have low inventory. We have the US real estate market that has proved to be so resilient for the past nearly 100 years. And we've also got 67, this is from US News and World Report, again, from about 6 months ago, about 72 million millennials that are planning to be in the market to buy a home in the next 5 years. I didn't put that in there, but it was like in the next 5 years. So you've got to have, it's looking like, especially here in Southern California, where we're pretty much landlocked and we're not going to have too much additional building happening. You're going to have low inventory for a while. You're going to have much more demand compared to supply for a while around here. And then on top of that, real estate is just a champion. It's so resilient. So all those factors, if you look at it all, I mean, how could you bet against it? Now, this is a chart, and it's kind of hard to see, but these are the actual numbers going back from 1942 all the way in the top left down to this year. If you look at it, every single year it's green. That means it went up in value, the average home sales price. And in 1990 and 91, we had 2 years where it went down 1%, and then 90, 91, it went down 0. And then, of course, the crash in 2007, 2008, we had about 4 or 5 years of negative. But other than that, everything's always been positive. And if you look at history, it says from 1943 to 1947, prices compounded 118% in that 5-year span. And then you'd think, okay, we had a huge run up in prices. We're going to have a correction, right? No, they didn't have a correction. Prices continued to go higher for the next 43 years. And then from 74 to 79, prices also had a huge run up in price. They compounded 93% during that 5-year span. And then what happened after that? Prices went higher for another 10 years after that, before going down only 1% in 1990. So, and then after that, you had another 14 years of positive gains. And everybody seems to focus, because it's so recent, right? It's all in our recent memory. What happened in 2007 to 2011, which was the 4 consecutive decline, 5 consecutive years of declining property values nationally speaking. That was a huge hit. That's the biggest hit we've ever seen in, since they started measuring this. And by the way, this data is from, it's from the Federal Reserve. It's from the Federal Reserve. You can find it on I'll see if I can find the link and send it to Kelvin. Because that website actually has a lot of this information. It's really cool. But anyway, but look, even after the crash of 2007 to 2011, where you had roughly it's about a 30% compounded drop. In the next 2 years, you got 17% of that back. And then by 2015, you pretty much had recouped all your losses. So, I mean, unless you're buying property to flip it, like in the next 6 months or a year, you don't really have to be too concerned about a crash, because even if there is a crash or a correction, if you're buying real estate for the long term, you're eventually going to recoup whatever you might have lost in a little bit of a correction or a crash. I mean, if history proves itself to be, an indicator of future performance, which it almost always is. So when I show people these numbers, it gives them a reality check. They're like, okay, real estate is not a bad thing to invest in, especially if it's for the long term. Anybody have any questions on that? No? Okay. This is a powerful chart to show somebody that's concerned and waiting for, prices to come down. So, and the last one I want to address is another objection we have is the hesitancy for buyers to want to pay more than what the seller's asking for the property, paying over the list price. And again, going back to the same thing, tell them that the house is probably going to go up in value, maybe 5-6% in between now and a year from now. So whatever, consider that, take that in consideration when you're considering paying over asking. Yeah, you might pay a little bit more now than what the seller's asking, or a little bit more than what you feel comfortable paying. But think about the opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the cost of waiting, the cost of losing out on an opportunity. So you have to consider that and say, okay, if I don't buy this property now, or don't pay this much now for this property, I'm going to lose out on that appreciation I will have realized a year from now. If I buy it now, I'll lose out on that 5.8% appreciation. And that appreciation, which pretty much will probably offset most, if not all, of what, whatever overage you might be paying over the list price. So it might just cancel out or recoup that in 1 year. So again, inventory, let them know inventory is going to be a future potential challenge. And we're only mainly talking to people that are looking to buy here in the, LA metro area. So we know that the inventory problem is not going to go away around here anytime soon. Even if a bunch of people want to start selling, we still might not meet the demand for housing. We might still have an inventory shortage. So in a nutshell, interest rates, when you consider all these different things we've talked about, they really matter less than probably people think in their head, because they're not considering all these other factors. They're not considering the appreciation of the home, the opportunity cost that they're losing out on, the property tax benefits, the mortgage interest benefit, the capital gains tax benefit, like Kelvin was talking about. The benefit of potentially paying off high interest consumer debt with the equity that they have in their home that they can do if they sell their home and, realize that equity. All these different things are things that when you present it to someone that you're talking to out there on the street that's thinking about selling their house and buying something new, or just buying a house in general, these are things that most people don't hear about. They don't hear about that in the news mostly. They don't talk about things like this, so. If you can program yourself to get in the habit of bringing these things up to people as you're out there talking, potential clients. You're gonna be giving these people information that they need to hear, but they aren't necessarily hearing. That they need to consider, but they aren't necessarily considering. Why do they need to hear it? Why do they need to consider it? Because they're not gonna be making informed decisions about what's best for them and their household until they consider all these things. Because remember, these decisions have there are a lot of factors involved in making these decisions. So it's our job to make them, to help them see the entire picture. Not just the cons, but also the pros, which oftentimes people don't talk about the pros. They just talk about the cons because that's what people are afraid of. So let's put things in perspective. Let's give our prospective clients things to consider so that they're putting everything into perspective when they make decisions about whether or not it's best for them and their family to buy now or to sell their property. So anybody have any questions on that?
Yeah, very thorough presentation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, lots of information. Champion, don't date, marry.
Don't date.
Which is what we, for myself, or our buyers, what we say to the buyers is, don't fall in love with the house, be passionate about it. Because if your offer is not accepted, the breakup we're involved in that breakup, so we don't want those emotions to be running. So it's kind of similar to your analogy, so that's great. I'm gonna use that.
Okay, great. And I'll just recap since we're almost out of time. Again, the 4 things that we as lenders hear that are the most common objections. Reluctance to give up low rate and move up. We talked about that. Different strategies to address those concerns about giving up a low rate. It's not all about just the low rate. There's other things that they have to consider. They have to look at their whole financial picture, especially if they have a lot of consumer debt. Waiting for rates to come down. Who knows when that is going to happen? But remember, you got to combat that with the opportunity cost of waiting, because they're losing out on all that appreciation they would otherwise realize if they buy now. Waiting for house prices to come down. We talked about that. Historically, you can't bet against that champ of US real estate. I mean, if history proves itself again, which it often does, you're not going to lose. Maybe in a short-term thing you will, but if it's a long-term investment, I don't see anybody losing in that. And then hesitancy to pay over asking. Those are the things that we often struggle with buyers. They don't want to pay over asking, then they, they want to lowball the seller. And it's like, are you kidding? You could probably submit 100 offers on property here in LA and you probably won't get one of them. You'll be in the same boat 2 years from now, still looking for a property. In the meantime, that house you could have bought for 800,000 2 years ago is now selling for
1.3.
I wasn't gonna say that high, but yeah. So these are all things that we need to consider letting them know. And we all know this stuff, but they don't know it. So it's just a matter of programming ourselves to get our presentation down. And so that we can present these facts to them, because they need the facts, because without the facts, they're not making informed decisions. Here's what you can't control. We can't control all the things that people hear in the news, the jobs report, inflation. We can't control prices. We can't control the lack of inventory. We can't control what interest rates do. We can't control what the Federal Reserve do. We can't control what they're going to say in their policy statements. So, we have to get all that stuff out of our mind when we're dealing with our clients and our customers. And we can't, if the conversation is going towards that, we have to shift, not necessarily shift it away from that, because you don't want to ignore that because it is reality, but you also want to complement it with these other things we've talked about so they can see the whole picture. So you can't control this, but what you can control is what I'm talking about, talking to them about, is your attitude. We should have a positive attitude as we talk to people. We should not be pessimistic. Interest rates, yeah, they're high, but so what? They're at the 50-year average of what we've seen since 1971. Prices are high, okay, they're gonna probably go higher. So that's a good thing if you own. You're gonna go higher. You're gonna experience that appreciation. So you have to have a good attitude as you're talking to people. You have to be confident in what you say. Practice your speech. Make sure you sound confident. You don't want to sound like you're doubting yourself. Make sure you sound confident when you talk, because you should feel very secure in what you're advising your clients to do or about. Because they really need that. They need you to see, they need to see that you believe in what you're saying. So convince yourself. If you're not convinced, then don't try to pitch that presentation, but you need to be prepared. You need to prepare your speech, your presentation, your effort, and just go out there and prospect and have a smile on your face. And have a good attitude. And the more people you talk to, eventually you're gonna start getting deals, man, because it's a numbers game. So you're not gonna be able to convince everybody all the time, but the more people you talk to, every once in a while, you're gonna get that person that gets it and is gonna want to work with you. And if you give them the right information, they'll be making decisions that are right for their family. So anyway, that's it. It's about 1:30. My time is up.
All
All
right.
right, let's give him a hand.
Yeah. We'll skip that. These are the current mortgage rates, by the way. This is about a week old. They might have gone up a tad bit, but that's where we're at right now.
Nothing
the
under
most-
2%.
Nothing under 2%. But they're still pretty good. They're about where they were when I got in the business 22 years ago. So
That's nice.
anyways, so anyway, thank you so much for for the time. Hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. I know I talk a lot. We are doing fully underwritten pre-approvals. So if you've got any buyers that really want to submit an offer with like no loan contingency. You know, we do these fully underwritten pre-approvals so that they feel more comfortable doing that if they want to.
Called a DU approval in terms of what.
Yeah, it's a DU approval, but we can actually go one step further and actually submit it to the underwriter, get all the income and credit profile signed off on underwriters. So it's an even more solid underwriting approval. But most people don't need that, but some people do. So anyway, just thought I'd mention them. Anyway, thanks for your time. Thank you,
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you so much for bringing some of the pizza back
Yes.
there.
Oh,
Thank you,
yeah, thank
everybody.
you so much for your time.
Oriana, thank you for bringing the cake as well. You want to say a few words? before-
Yes, and you're a guest, so you didn't even.
I'm a
have to bring
guest.
anything.
I'm just a
Man,
guest.
you're
She's just
generous.
kind
You're just
and generous
Thank
and
you.
love to be educated.
Yeah.
Before we just next speaker, just a lot of this was geared towards a buyer off the fence. One thing to keep in mind to get a seller off the fence too. I don't know how many of you are following Biden's administration's 2025 proposal for the tax budget? Anyone following Biden, our president, our leader?
I'm somewhat.
Okay. So who knows
don't
what
talk
long,
politics.
he talked about long-term capital gains. No, this is not politics.
No, no, I'm just
This
kidding.
is life.
Yeah, no.
Taxation is life.
Yeah, yeah,
There's only a few things that are.
of course.
Taxes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And capital gains is treated how much, Mary? Long term, roughly at 20, and then you add state. Okay, so you're closer towards a 30% for most people, 35. The new proposal for 2025 to get sellers off the fence is to treat long-term capital gains to 44.6%. Okay, and then you add 15% for state of California, and that becomes 59% taxation on long-term capital gains. This is targeted toward people like you. I'm looking at you. It's people who invest in stocks, high net worth people, or cryptocurrency people. This is targeted towards higher net worth people. But that's 60% of the federal and state taxation against your long-term capital gains is becoming a good reason why to sell now before that triggers effect. That's the proposal on the table right now. So just think about that. Okay, how many of you heard of the mansion millionaire tax?
Yes.
City of Los Angeles, 4% of your proceeds needs to be paid to the city of Los Angeles if you have a property there that's over $5 million, which is simply just like a duplex or triplex.
Yeah.
They gotta pay 4% of those proceeds for the tax. So anyway, those are just things to consider to get sellers off the fence and consider selling. We have a great introduction. You're gonna take a lead for this one,
Yes.
Sylvia?
Yes, I'm gonna take a lead in this one. I want it to be unbiased. I have to tell you, this has been an extraordinary moment for me personally to be able to introduce this person to you that you all know and love and have seen her grow. And of course, in all her accolades by our mama bear. You know, so we're all very excited about that. But not only, I mean, to me, what does Cindy Chang mean to me? She's way more than just Mary's daughter. She's way more than just Kelvin's sister. She's way more than a colleague because she's a licensee. She's way more to a lot of people, and you're gonna get to know why. For those of you that know her personally, I've had the privilege to know her personally and to be able to call her my friend, is because she's a girl's girl. She's a very powerful female that goes out and advocates. And I hope that you learn and use that word more and more, because you as realtors, as professional real estate practitioners, you're advocates. Now, take a look at the room. How many of us are here? Thank you, Randy, for being here to mix up the, you know, the diversity in here, and you, Kelvin, and you, Martin. But, you know, a lot of the women in this industry, we're kicking butt. So I have to say that along those words, you know, Cindy is a very consistent person, human being. When it comes to anything, you can talk to her in the morning and the afternoon and the evening. She's got a consistent flow. She's so humble, but she's so intelligent. And at the same time, she's here. I mean, I'm like, wow, you know what? I can probably call Biden and he'll be here a lot sooner than I can call Cindy. You know, this because Cindy is so busy, like we all are. Now we're all balanced our life, but you know, she didn't want me to read her bio, but I'm going to read her bio because she earned that. She earned this bio. So Cindy Chang is a Los Angeles managing partner of Duane Morris LLP, and Ms. Chang represents businesses and solves their problems. She served as National Asian Pacific American Bar Association president and Southern California Chinese Lawyers Association past president. She's been honored by the SoCal Chinese Lawyers with its inaugural Trailblazer Award. She is a board member of the Committee of 100 of a group prominent Chinese Americans in the U.S. And she also serves for the board of directors at Loyola Law School in LA. She has been recognized as a top 50 women of Southern California super lawyers. Daily Journal Top 100 California Women's Lawyers. And she's with the NAPABA Best Lawyers Under 40. And Champion of Women. Champion, there's that word again, champion. Most influential minority attorneys and community impact advocate by the LA Business Journal. Cindy's a graduate of Loyola Law School, LA, and a graduate with honors of Johns Hopkins University. And it's with my privilege and honor to be able to present her here, because I've been after her for a while and she's been very, very graceful to accept, and she's here. So thank you. Let's welcome her.
Thank you.
I'm gonna set up the.
That was so nice, Sylvia. I'm gonna send you that check later for the nice words. And Martin, thank you so much. I actually learned a lot, so I feel like I want to buy a property too, because I too was looking for interest rates to drop, but I learned something today. So does anyone know a real estate agent?
We don't know real estate agents because we are what? Realtors, remember? Yeah,
Exactly.
that's right.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
oh
Go
no,
ahead.
thank you, Mary Chang, my mother. Thank you for the cake. Thank you, Kelvin, everybody. So Sylvia had reached out to me to talk about diversity and inclusion. And, you know, I could talk about real estate law all the time, but you guys get that. So we're going to go in a little bit different direction. I think that talking about diversity, inclusion, equity is important, just not only for a thriving real estate environment, but this is kind of important for just the personal life. So professionally, personally, this is the market that you are selling to. This is the environment that you need to cater to so that you can be engaged and that you can understand it and you can relate to it. So I think it is going to be very important to talk about this. So we're going to talk about DEI. The acronym is diversity, equity, inclusion. That's now the corporate, phrase talk that people use. Diversity, equity, inclusion. Before it used to be just diversity. And then now people usually say DEI, and I'll explain. I'm going to break down those three words, and then I'm going to talk about implicit bias, how we can be aware of it and try to be more conscious about avoiding it. So going to the slides. Oh, Calvin, how do I?
Right,
Oh, just this one?
right.
Okay. Okay, great. So DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. So we're going to talk about implicit bias. We're going to go through some examples. My PowerPoint's up there. Okay, good. Solutions about that. And then we're going to just try to take our own perspective of the world a little bit better than where we were before, because we all, myself included, every single person has implicit biases. So here's some ground rules. So this is with you. This is not judgment of anybody else. This is something that you internally will come after this exercise and think, okay, I want to challenge myself. It's a you on you exercise. Be vulnerable to some of your own biases. Lean into, so think about it, your own challenges and how you think. Be open to growing and evolving and challenge yourself. So DEI, breaking it down. Diversity, like I said, equity, inclusion. So diversity is not really an individual is diverse. You have to think about diversity as a group of people who are being different within that group of people. So it's a collective or group, and it's with respect to the relationship of others. So in this picture, you see there's people that come from everywhere. This is a diverse group. And equity. So I'm going to go into this later, and I have this great slide that will show that. But it's your awareness that everyone comes with certain advantages or disadvantages. No one, people come from different starting places to where they want to be. So to understand that we want to have equity for everybody, we have to sometimes make accommodations or understanding or tolerance to achieve ultimate equity. Inclusion. So inclusion is the concept of creating a space where everyone feels that they're welcome and they're invited and they're accepted, no matter what. So this is inclusion. So we broke down those three words. So now we're going to go to the first word. So why do we talk about diversity? More than 35% of the population is considered multicultural. That means different, cultural identities. In 2018, 50% was reached, wherein most babies in the US are not white. And as of 2020, more than half, more than 50% of the children will be part of a minority group or an ethnic group. And it's predicted that by 2044, no one racial group, not Caucasians, will dominate the US in terms of numbers. So I kind of wanted to break down diversity. We often think of diversity as race, but we really need to unpack that. So diversity is holistically all kinds of different aspects that bring yourself to the table. So relational diversity, your family, your marriage, your recreation, your habits, what generation you're in. Physical diversity, your age, your gender, your appearance, your sexual orientation, your physical abilities or disabilities. Societal diversity, what's your language, race, ethnicity, geography, education. Cognitive diversity, your IQ, your thinking, your learning, your communication, are you an introvert, are you an extrovert? values diversity? What's your culture? What beliefs do you have? What religion, what political party you affiliated with, what your attitudes and philosophies or life? And then your occupational diversity. What's your work experience? What industry are you in? What's your role, your title? How long you've been working, your seniority, your tenure. So all these characteristics were all a combination of different diversity characteristics. I brought this slide in because I really wanted to talk about just really quickly, because I think it's so interesting, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time. We could spend a whole hour, but generational diversity to me as the managing partner of a large law firm has been really important, because we are working side by side with people of many different ages. So you've got, here's the silent generation, oh, excuse me, baby boomers from that age, Generation X, the millennials, Generation Y, and Gen Z, which is the most newer generation. Millennials or Generation Y, if they are not already, they're going to be soon the dominant group of who you're going to be working with. And there's a lot of discussion about millennials and, you know, the stereotypes about millennials and how they're so different from prior generations. So I wanted to just focus a little bit on these millennials, the Gen Yers is what they call them. Stereotypically, they're thought, oh, they're narcissistic. They only care about themselves. They're entitled. They need trophies to say, you know, like when the kids are having a sports team, they all get participation trophies. There's not one trophy winner. Everybody's a winner because they all feel like they're winners and that they're lazy and they're coddled. Now, again, these are stereotypes, but, you know, when you really think about millennials and their communication styles, they came from, they're very different from Gen Xers and baby boomers. They are a very opinionated generation, and they are what we call digital natives. So they're the first generation that that were born with personal computers, the internet, mobile technology, and social media. That's not new to them. That's their natural way to connect with people through electronic means. And, you know, they care a lot about causes, about, you know, like I know just personally, when I'm interviewing millennials, they care more about like, what's the values of this organization? What am I going to make a difference? You know, and so very environmentally conscious is another trait about, you know, millennials. So, you know, it's an understanding that generations are formed by their social influences. So here in this slide, I've talked about socially, culturally, politically, economically. They grew up with certain kinds of events. So Gen Yers, millennials, they saw 9/11, you know, the war on terror, Columbine shooting, the scandals of Enron, Wall Street, the, you know, all the corporate issues, and the information sharing through technology. Everything is out there. To them, anything is findable. You can find anything on the internet. So they think that, you know, why can't you just have a chart? Why can't you just find on the internet? It's that accessible for them because they've always had that information very accessible to them growing up. So I just spend a little bit of time because I just find it fascinating. But you know, I'm going to move on. But generational diversity, again, these are people young, older, that come from a different societal influences based on what they grew up with. So why do we want to think about diversity and inclusion in our workplace and what we're doing every day? Is we want to keep these people. We want to keep, you know, we want them to be here and feel included. It's been shown by numerous statistics in consulting companies and so forth, that when you have diverse teams and perspectives, you improve your work product. So when you have people working together, engaged, male, female, different ages, different cultural experiences, different racial backgrounds, you come up with a product that is a better quality. When you have diverse teams, you might have different teams that connect better with different clients, and it just enriches the workplace culture. It makes it more comprehensive and more robust. So, excuse me. equity. So we're moving to the second word in DEI, equity. So equity is realizing that, like I said before, it's understanding where people come from, and sometimes you have to make accommodations because not everyone starts off at the same place. And it's important because we want to avoid or mitigate people feeling dissatisfied with work or with their relationship with you if you're working with them. If you have this is a concept called quit and stay, which is that it avoids the quit and stay concept, which is people show up for work with their bodies, but in their brains and their hearts are at home because they're phoning it in basically. And so we want to increase engagement and have people feel like, hey, I'm going to work and I feel included, that people understand me. So I created this this little table that kind of maybe demonstrates better for you the difference between equality and equity. So on the photo with that says equality, everybody has an equal access to seeing this baseball game. Equity is everybody has an equal access to seeing that baseball game, but you see that little person, he ends up getting a little bit of a help because he came from a different place. He may be shorter. So it's making sure that everybody has the same ability to have that opportunity, but making those accommodations so that there's equity thought about. And then liberation is just, everybody gets to achieve, the view once we achieve equity. And again, the same photo, but equality, equity, but reality, that this is how really it is. There's people that have just advantages in life, privilege or opportunities that weren't afforded to other people in different groups. And some people really are starting from below the starting base, that they are coming with certain disadvantages or perceptions based on what group that they may identify with. So the last word in the acronym DEI is inclusion, and I want to talk about inclusion. So inclusion is making everyone feel welcome for growth reasons, retention, making sure that people are retained and stay and are satisfied, helps with productivity, success, and it creates opportunities for everybody to learn from each other. So what's the most significant impediment to getting DEI in your workplace or in your relationships with other? What's the challenge of trying to get there? And I would say it's implicit bias. So this is what I was talking about. Unconscious bias, it's used a lot in corporate speak. It's something that we have underlying us certain attitudes and stereotypes that attribute to how we perceive someone else. And it's fine. I mean, everybody has it. Like if you had a certain experience with a particular incident, you may always think about that experience based on that incident. It kind of educates, informs you. Like every time I go down this one street, that street that I got in an accident of, I'm scared. I'm scared because that street is something that I had a traumatic incident of. And so I'm going to think that street is inherently dangerous, because I personally had certain experiences with certain incidences. It could be interactions with other people, groups, or so forth. And you carry that with you. So I'm going to provide some examples of how this plays out. So there was a study, it's called Written in Black and White, and they had an African-American employee write this article. They had a Caucasian person use that same exact article. They're exactly identical, except one was provided identity of being Black and the other one was provided identity of Caucasian. Nevertheless, despite their being identical, they were judged differently. The Caucasian had a higher rating than the African-American. And with the Caucasian candidate, they had comments like, he's generally a good writer, but needs to work on blah, blah, blah. He has potential. He has good analytical skills. So they were more positive and encouraging, whereas in the African-American candidate, it was needs lots of work, can't believe he went to NYU, he's average at best. So it tended to be a little bit more critical. And again, so despite the product being exactly the same, and the only variable that was different for the reviewer was their race, there was a change in how that particular work product was perceived. So again, another example, this is in 2016. So this is an actual real event. So there's an African-American female physician. She was on a Delta flight, and the passenger became sick, and they asked, who's a doctor? And so anyone is a physician? That African-American doctor came up to help, and the flight attendant said, "Oh no, sweetie, put your hand down. We're looking for actual physicians. We don't have time to talk to you." So she had to produce her credentials, but the flight attendant still did not believe the doctor. And a white male passenger came up and said he was a doctor. And the flight attendant said to the African-American doctor, "Never mind, we don't need you anymore." So who was harmed? Was it the patient that needed help immediately? Was it the doctor, the African-American doctor? Was it Delta Airlines that got a whole bunch of bad press from this?
It was the person that was hurt ultimately.
Yeah.
All of the above, but ultimately, the person that needed attention should have had attention immediately regardless.
Right. And so, again, these are just unconscious biases where it proliferates and harm in so many different ways. Corporate marketing for Delta, the doctor who's going to have to, she lives as a credentialed doctor, but goes out in the world where people don't expect her to be a doctor. Even when she tries to prove herself to be a doctor, she's always expected to be something less. And the patient who didn't get immediate attention. So these are the kinds of things that we have to realize come up in everyday situations. Again, implicit bias, everyone has them. They're not really reflections of who we are. It's really just, like I said, sometimes inadvertent experiences that you've had that have formed and shaped your opinion today. And they're not really based on rational information, it's just on our emotional and visceral responses, like how we reacted a certain way. We kind of carry it with us. And the good news is that they can be redirected. They can be changed. They are not permanent. So, how does this unconscious bias happen? It's how we were socialized, how we were raised, life experiences, what was, accepted or normal in our communities, our region, our home, our household, our family, our friends, our colleagues, our education, what media outlets you're using. So, huh?
Fox News.
Oh, no, I'm not making any political commentary here. So, so, I brought some two graphical images. So this is actual real stuff. This is in a children's book. They had a white photo of a boy who's showing first place. I'm proud. Then they show the angry. What's angry? It's an African-American person who's depicted as angry. I show this picture of no, it's LL Cool J.
That's LL Cool J.
LL Cool J and Martha Stewart. And, yeah, there's a stereotype that, African Americans, commit crimes. But in this picture, actually, Martha Stewart is the one that was convicted of a federal crime. She was convicted of insider trading. So, but again, it's just kind of ironic of the perceptions and stereotypes that we have. Okay. So, there are good things about unconscious bias. Okay, don't get me wrong. It's a way to shortcut thinking. It's to make quick decisions. You know, when you feel threatened or instinctively, you need those to like inform you when you need to have a quick reaction. So especially like if you're threatened or whatever, you need to have a specific, you have to protect yourself in certain situations. So our brain needs these kinds of reactions, because if we've been there through this before, we know exactly, okay, I'm gonna put, I know how to react. I've been here before. So you need those. So understand that that's just how our brain works. We have these automatic reactions based on what we've learned. So a part of unconscious bias is what we call affinity or similarity bias. And I want to explain what that means is that we inherently and we commonly want to be with people who share similar backgrounds or experiences or interests with us. So we are kind of, it just makes it more, I guess, easier, right? Because these are people that that may know us, who resemble us, they look like us, and so forth. So when we have affinity bias, it really does affect, the people you end up working with, the people you end up relating with, the people you go out with. So it kind of ends up to be cyclical, where it ends up kind of coming to a confirmation bias, which I'll explain later, which is that you end up choosing this certain group, and then you end up creating more of a bias in a certain direction. So here's examples of affinity bias in an interview situation. Interviewers may have a tendency to hire candidates who went to their school, their alma mater. They may have a tendency to hire candidates who played college sports, like maybe they did. Or, if you come from the same hometown, you give them a little bit extra, reward or marks because they came from the same place you did. Or you go to the same vacations, or you like the same things. So these are all affinity biases. You favor people who have a similarity to you. And then, like I was saying, then there's confirmation bias. So it's our bias to favor those people that confirm our beliefs. So we draw conclusions about a people based on our own prejudices, beliefs, or desires, rather than actually objectively their merit. So we believe what we want to believe. And so so if you have a theory about a certain thing and you're looking for that certain thing, you will end up finding it because that's exactly what you're looking for. So I'm going to give you an example of confirmation bias. So this manager who's hiring, he says, okay, people of the orange religion they're lazy. So then therefore, because he believes people who are the orange religion are lazy, he never gives the orange religion people any assignments. So at the end of the year, when he's evaluating everybody, no orange religion people end up getting the key work or the key productivity assignments, because he created his own confirmation bias, because he created a situation where he, based on his belief that orange religion people are lazy, he never gave those people any key work. So that's how you create this situation where your own biases create the situation that you're trying to confirm for yourself. So just in the second example, this other manager, he believes females want to just work at home. They focus more on taking care of their family and not at work. So to handle that, he decides to give the male employees all the good opportunities that help them get faster in promotion. And so therefore, in their workplace, the women are not promoted as fast as the men, because again, his own affinity bias created that situation that confirmed exactly what he thought. He thought women didn't want to be promoted, so he created that situation based on his bias. So again, we have to be just aware of how this works. Another types of unconscious bias: gender bias, preferring one gender over another. Examples: interviewers believe that women leave the workplace to have children, men are more confident than women. So as a result, then you end up hiring more men because you want to have more men in the workplace because you think the women are going to leave. And then again, giving the male employees more of the better assignments. Age-based bias. So, there's a stereotype that millennials, they jump a lot, in terms of longevity than their peers. So, people might say, well, there's a millennial, he's not going to stay here. So let's tend to hire the older candidates. And then another bias is, well, there's a belief that older candidates who are overqualified position is less likely to stay in the role than a younger child. So then they hire the older candidates over the younger ones. So again, just another examples. Now I want to talk about something related to unconscious bias, which is microaggression. So this is also corporate speak for the little microaggressions, the little things that are like kind of little jabs at work that you may not think that it's big, but they're like little slights that they could be verbal, they're nonverbal, they're little snubs, little insults that they might not be intentional, they could be unintentional, but it puts the other person in a either a defensive position or they're offended, and really might target them based on whatever group that they may be in. So I'm just going to give some random examples, but I'm going to pick the LGBTQ community. So sometimes you might say, like, people say, that's so gay, that's so gay. You're too pretty to be a lesbian. You don't look gay, sometimes people make it important thing for them to use their pronouns. If they put it in their signature block, it's important to them. Talking about, to someone who's gay, like, do you have a girlfriend? Your wife must be so proud, like when they may be gay. So that's to a man. So again, these are just some things that are, might be just said casually, but not realizing that it's actually offending somebody who may be in the LGBT community or otherwise.
And Cindy, may I add
yeah.
an anecdote on that one?
Yes, please.
Give you a little break. Would you like some water?
No,
I'm talking a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. I'm gonna throw myself under the bus and give you an example. So I was at a board meeting that had just finished at one of the associations. So Mark was wearing a pink shirt. So someone says to Mark, I didn't know you were peeking on the other side of the wall.
Mhm.
So first of all, if he is, it's nobody's business, right? So, okay, so then I say something, as to, didn't you know that confident men wear pink? So then a person in the group that we know that is gay says, hey, watch it there. So kidding around, joking around, one layer over another layer, you think you're helping that person, but it can actually be offending the other person as well. So I just wanted to add that and share that, because as much as I'm mindful of what I say, you can never be too careful. We want to walk on eggshells. No, I was not walking on eggshells there. I thought I was being helpful, to kind of divert the attention from someone that feels uncomfortable to make the other person feel comfortable. But sometimes, I don't know if you want to add any of that, Cindy, but I just wanted to share that because unconsciously we may say things that, may offend someone, not knowing that you're offending them. And we're gearing this towards you going on a listing appointment and, you're making a comment to someone that's a seller and they're wearing a pink shirt. You don't want to tell the seller is wearing a pink shirt, oh, I didn't know you're peeking on the other side, or I didn't know you're gay. We don't want to make comments like that. Sometimes being in a silent moment, it's okay to be silent. It's okay you don't need to fill in the gap of silence. So I just wanted to share that with you. We all come from different backgrounds. We all look different. We all speak different. And what I love to say, especially when I'm in the recruiting mode, is we're not a cookie cutter office. We cater to everyone. We're all inclusive. So when you keep hearing me say we're all inclusive office, when you keep hearing me say be mindful, is the same thing. It's actually the same thing. When somebody will come up to you and say, oh, you look like you've been losing weight. What does that mean? You know, does that mean you were overweight? So, here's one that's commonly used in the workforce a lot back in the days is, oh, you look better today than you did yesterday. Yesterday, you didn't look so well. I would say, I wasn't wearing eyeshadow or mascara. Maybe that's why, I remember one of my brokers saying to me, you need to put on some more rouge. And I said, okay, thank you. I'll think about that. What is rouge? And I'm thinking, okay, is that blush? Because of the terms. But I just want to share, and this is all good. We're all family here, but when you step out into the field, I just want you to be more mindful, especially if you're in other groups and other clubs. So I just wanted to add to that, Cindy.
Sure,
Thank
and so when I'm talking about this is not for you to go out the world and be scared and say, I'm not gonna say whatever because I'm just gonna offend somebody. Like, there's so much PC and it's so ridiculous that, people are so sensitive. That's not the message. The message is that, we are our own unique experiences and come, presenting ourselves in a certain way, but everybody else has their own particular stories, single, married, widowed, whatever, like everybody has these different things that they come from a little bit different perspective. And if you come to work and you go and you sell out there and you're meeting vendors and you're meeting, buyers or sellers, you want to be open and receptive that they don't have the same story as you. So you don't want to make assumptions. And I'm in the sales business too. So I sell my legal services and I know that I am very warm, I'm very welcome, and I listen a lot. So that is like the number one selling thing. Selling to me is not talking. Selling to me is listening, because I always listen to understand where they came from so that I can understand where I might not understand. Like maybe someone said, I came from, I don't know, some random country that I've never been to. For me, I'm not going to make assumptions. And I'm like, really, I want to know more about that. So that helps with the engagement of that particular client and really creates a connection where you're not judging, but you're trying to bridge relationships, if that makes sense. So you just have to be open that it's not just your perspective, that sometimes you have to check yourself, that there are other people with different stories that come from different places. So again, going to these examples like race and national origin, microaggressions, wow, what an accent. How long have you been here? Or, wow, you speak English so well, when you, lived here for so long. Like for me, like, I only know English really, and people are like, wow, you speak English so well. So, okay, thanks, an Asian person, you're good at math. Could you take a look at that, or
here's another one I'd like to add. I've been told many times throughout my life, oh, I didn't know you're Mexican, you're light skinned. Yeah.
So, you don't, look this way, or African Americans, I know they're really sensitive about, or really proud actually is the word, of their hair. And people are like, hey, can I touch your hair? Or things like that. Your skin is so dark, but you're so beautiful, which implies, if you have darker skin, that's not beautiful. So again, they're like things that you don't mean, like you're trying to compliment them, but it's coming off as something that could be actually, derogatory or offensive to them.
Which is what we call backhanded compliment.
Well, the common denominator, and most of these are physical or tangible things that are based on appearance.
Mhm.
So don't break the ice on something based on appearance. Okay? Because like you said, oh, you look so skinny today.
Yeah.
And some cultures in America, sure, the models are skinny, but in Asia and China, being skinny is not healthy. You're unhealthy. You actually want to be plump. That shows that you actually find that you have enough money.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay,
Mhm.
but what my key, when I go to open houses, when I meet strangers, when I doing all these with interactions. I don't make any assumptions, I don't make any judgments. How you doing today? Oh, I talked about the life, I said, oh, how's life treating you, oh my gosh, I talked something about relevant in the news, or. Oh, you watched the Lakers game yesterday, some easier things that are less offensive that can offend anyone. It's probably my suggestion for all of you, don't make any assumptions on who's walking in. Because a rich person could be wearing the sloppiest, clothing or shoes.
Yeah.
A lot of them like to be low, they come in and just sweats and shorts or whatever. So don't make those presumptions, oh, and I'm not gonna pay any attention to them because they're driving a poor car. Okay, that's not necessarily true. There's some rich people I know are driving still like, a Camry or something that's old, 90s.
I'm reminded of that scene in Pretty Woman, that movie with
Yes,
Julia
yes.
Roberts.
Love
And she
that.
had that credit card of her boyfriend that was ready to spend money everywhere, but then she,
Boyfriend or pimp?
or yeah, and she walked in the store and then the arrogant and snobby salespeople didn't want to help her. And and then she came back and said, you missed out, and she bought all these things. So exactly, like you never know who that buyer is if you're judging people just based on what they look like.
Yeah.
So going on the same trend, ableism. So this is where you kind of putting down and assigning inferior worth to people who have developmental, emotional, physical, psychiatric disabilities. So you're like devaluing their potential. So, uh, you know, um, they might be, like in a hand, they might be in a wheelchair, I would hate to be you. I could never deal with that. It's kind of like making them feel like that their disability is a curse.
Mhm.
And you look so normal, so healthy. You don't act like you have this, whatchamacallit. So it's like you're kind of, again, just making them feel like what they have is making them less of a person.
Are you all getting this? Yeah, I'm sure a lot of stuff is going in on because I can see your forehead. You're like, oh, is that what that person meant when they told me this?
So here are the factors that kind of create more implicit biases and make it more likely to happen is if you deny it, that you deny that exists, which it's not true. It does exist. When you have these emotional, quick decisions, information overload, you have these snap judgments about situations, even when they're not necessary. So again, let's just be mindful of them. Less, factors that help it less likely to happen. You acknowledge that there's implicit biases. You be more deliberate, more conscious about how you make your decisions, and pay attention to how you react to things, how you label, how you come to conclusions. And what I say is focus on cultural fit rather than cultural add. So what I mean that is when you're looking for somebody, let's say you want to work with them, either in the workplace or in in a transactional relationship, you are probably trying to find someone that's like, hey, they're culturally fitting with me, I get along with them, but they have these differences. Think of it more as an ad. Like, no, I want that difference. I embrace somebody who has a different philosophy than me. It's going to make this relationship better. So you're focused on embracing people that are different than you. And that was really it. Thank you so much. I gonna want to open to discussion. I know there's kind of weighty topics. I tried to make it light so that we can kind of address it. Some of these things could be talked about for hours, but I'd love to have any questions or feedback or comments. If you have any.
Don't be shy on the questions. You're not gonna single yourself out.
It's good because I've said some of those things,
Uh-huh.
like now thinking back, I've actually said some of those things.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't think about it until now that, they didn't come across.
Not the way you wanted to.
Yeah, and maybe you didn't intend to offend somebody, but maybe you did.
Right. Now, is any of this taught, Cindy, at grammar schools or middle schools or high schools? Because I feel like these words are very sophisticated. A couple of these words, I didn't even know. We were actually looking them up, we were
Uh-huh.
learning all this. But this is part of life coaching. Like I would feel like if I had younger children, I'd want them to learn all this. So are you aware if any of this is being taught at any of the schools for the younger people?
I think in some schools, I certainly know there's some schools that really focus on inclusivity and diversity and stuff. Others focus on more academics. I mean, I know that my kids, they might, I mean, I have kids in elementary school, so they're quite young and in middle school, and some of them are already coming across people who identify with a different gender. So it's young, but like they'll say, this female in my class, she said that she's a boy, and she wants, she's a lesbian or this or that or trans or something. And, I said, how do you feel about that? And he said, it's fine with me. I said, that's good. You should accept them and, make sure that, people don't bully them, that, everybody's welcome, I mean, whatever they're going through to figure that out. But I mean, your children, your friends, your relatives, you will come across, situations where people might identify with a group that you're not familiar with and might make you feel uncomfortable, but this is the reality, and people are coming from different places. And if you don't have a kind of being that accepts them, and you come off as someone that is not welcoming and not understanding, then you won't really have a true relationship with that person. So again, if you want business, if you want to have, strong relationships with others, realize there are a lot of people out there with a lot of different perspectives. And I mean, I can tell you, it doesn't even have to be physical differences. It could be differences with politics too, that, let's just say, I just only want to deal with Democrats, because I cannot stand talking to Republicans, or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
So Jerry brought up a word that is an old antique word, jealousy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much corporate jealousy, corporate bullying. And I mean, I know at CAR, they're starting to have these classes because now they're starting to look at leaders and how those leaders got to those positions. Because other people are saying, they bullied their way up. So these lawsuits going on are opening up it's an eye-opening thing to where, I remember when I first went to a first CAR meeting, I was walking in the hallways and I heard all these realtors speaking at the podium. I was intimidated. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm scared. These people are mean. You know how they talk, their body language, their tone. I've been doing this for 30 years and I know more and this and that. I'm like, I'm a rookie. I had just started. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to go home. But at the end of the day, I ran into somebody in the hallway that looked at me the way Kelvin looked at me, like I'm wanted, I'm special, like you matter, and that's what Kelvin made me feel like. When I first met Kelvin, I said, okay, Kelvin's not gonna talk to me. But he did. He was the most pleasant person, and anybody who is perceived to be like me didn't. So the person that gave me a tour and showed me around ended up being the CEO of the CAR organization. And I thought he was the maintenance person because he carried a bunch of keys. And I stereotyped him and I thought, okay, he's a maintenance person. And he directed me. And I said, oh, thank you. He says, are you afraid of these people? I said, I am. He says, don't be afraid. They don't bite. So he and I became really, 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 really good friends and still communicate with each other. But what I'm saying to you is that it's okay to be afraid, but express it. I was able to express it, show my vulnerability. And then I was able to create that, because that jealousy word, I don't like it. There's no reason for any of you to be jealous of anyone or anyone to be jealous of you. If you have two eyes, and even if you don't, how many people out there are on marathons and only have one leg? And we look at them and it's like, oh my gosh, I feel bad. No, they're stronger
they're out there, they're being champions. So, but the word jealousy has no cure. There's no medicine for it. There's nothing. There's just absolutely no cure for jealousy. And that word, I am afraid of, Jerry. I'm very afraid of that.
At the end of the day, jealousy is everywhere.
It is.
It is.
It is.
It's something that we're not gonna show that there are classes and protected classes of what happened in the pandemic. I mean, there was the Juneteenth thing, there was a lot of people who felt offended, and my ancestors were slaves, and they still to this day, even though slavery was abolished by Abraham Lincoln in the 1868 Proclamation of Reformation, it's still feeling jealousies 200 years later. Okay, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so, when we were talking about that slide of equity, where you might not start at the same spot, because there's not real equity. So I'll give you an example in the legal industry. So, when I walk into a courtroom, I am definitely the minority. There's not a lot of women and there's not a lot of minorities, period. It's mostly white male in the legal industry. To give you an idea of statistics, so in the entire country of all law firms, whether it's a small law firm or a big law firm, all minority female attorneys is less than 3%. Like that includes African American, Hispanic, and Asian. So it's mostly, it's a very, very small percent. So when I walk into a courtroom, I've had situations where they think that I'm the assistant, or, I'm the court reporter that's doing the records, or, if I'm in a room with a meeting with a client, they'll ask me to get coffee. So I am not starting as the equal, right? Because based on what I look like, there's an automatic assumption that I don't belong. So I'm starting at a disadvantage, and then I have to prove myself or show my credentials. No, I'm the lawyer. I'm here to argue this case. I'm not here to take notes. So
In the sixties or the seventies, when I came into business, real estate was probably 60% men. Yep. Look around you now. It was mostly men.
Yeah.
If there was women, it was perceived they came in for coffee clutching and have a few conversations and go home. They weren't really real estate agents. Well, look at today. Today, it's almost dominated by women. The
Right.
industry is dominated by women.
And so are your clients too, your customers, that they're diverse too. And if you want those sales and you want to expand your base, your customer base, you're going to have to be open to them. Nancy?
I just want to add an interesting fact. Years ago, Jerry, you remember all the caravan was at 8:00. They changed it to 8:30 or 9:00 because a lot of women are the ones that has to go to pitch. The women has to take
Take the kids to school.
That's right. So they have to.
Yeah.
Get a later time, so all the agents could be there. It was at
Right.
8 sharp, 8:00.
I was
You're
nine.
right. Next to you, Jerry.
He knows when to be submissive.
So what is your opinion today? Because we talk about a lot of these corporate board of directors and all the culture of what's going on. And we do see is predominantly male / maybe Caucasian driven. So is it good for companies, or do you see the future to allow, what's our word? Affirmative action kind of steps in allowing minorities to take a seat? Like we must have one African American, we must have two minorities. We have to have 2 females in this board. So should the corporates in the futures allow someone maybe less qualified to enter that role just because they have a need to have diversity?
So that's a very, very heavy topic. It's not gonna be covered right now. We can do an entire,
Yeah.
right now, the word affirmative action is it's in the Supreme Court, of the United States, that they've already ruled on a recent affirmative action case. So it's very, very, very complex. So back in the day, affirmative action was a concept that helped certain minority groups with certain statistical numbers to get into, for example, colleges. So they would have quotas. That has it's now illegal. So that's been ruled by the law as you cannot have quotas anymore. So the softer version of that is like what we're talking about now, which is DEI. It's really not about trying to get, 10 African Americans and 10 Asians. It's about like making sure that you have a diverse group that appreciates where they come from socioeconomically. Maybe they were poor growing up, maybe they were rich, maybe they're, come from a certain neighborhood. Like it's holistically looking at diversity, not just based on race. So it's continuing moving target because right now DEI is being challenged right now in the US Supreme Court, and controversial, political, but again, like quotas and all that stuff, that's no longer really what people use
But-
anymore.
Cause it's happening right now in San Marino. I'm trying to get my son into a school in dual immersion. They have an exact quota. I need 50% native speakers. I need 50% non-native. So it's happening in schools. I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
Yeah,
Right. You
yeah.
need to hire your sister.
No, I mean, again, there might be like a strategic reason for that. They want to have that particular class
Sure.
to be some
Sure.
already speaking Chinese, some are not, but it's not. When the law tries to challenge what is discriminatory, they don't look at those kinds of things. They look at race, gender, sexual orientation, and disability. Those are like the protected classes, and age. So yeah, so those are where we kind of, if you're discriminating based on those things and national origin too, then you have to look at that very carefully to make sure it doesn't discriminate.
Sure, and
So-
I'd like to add to that. So, as most of you know, I was the first Latina president for the Arcadia Association of Realtors. So when I went to Chicago and sat at the leadership table with a bunch of other women leaders, I didn't feel respected until I was asked, how many years did you serve on the executive team? I got asked that question. I said 4 years. They said, congratulations. Then I had the respect. So it was like a bias that I got that position because I was a Latina, which in no way, shape, or form, Kelvin's my witness. He knows that I probably took longer to climb up through the ranks because of the male gender. So I totally understand what you're saying. I also want to end up in saying that when I go to the meetings now, I'm not afraid. I go to the podium and I speak. But that was self-development and learning how to be more confident, which is what you're teaching us as well here, Cindy.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult, especially if you were raised with all these biases,
Mhm.
to always say the right thing. And you don't want to not have a conversation because you're worried you might say something that somebody might be offended by. But I think it's paramount that we keep in our mind that everybody deserves respect.
Yes,
No matter
exactly.
what they are, what they look like, or anything. We're all human beings, well deserve respect. But everybody at times is gonna say something that is the wrong thing. You're just, you can't help it. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't stay up with everything. I mean,
Right.
I don't think, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah,
But I try to look at everybody and say, I respect them because they're a person and a human being, no matter what.
I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but in reality, I don't practice that. Okay, I go down the street and I get approached by a lot of homeless people and I have people asking for money. I've had in my implicit bias, I've had situations where people threw stuff on my car, trash, or broke into my windows. And so I have a conscious thing that whenever someone asks me for money or asks me for food or something or whatever, they're sticking their hands out and they're approaching me, I have the implicit bias to just kind of walk away. And because of that, I can't give everyone respect. I actually am disrespecting them because I'm not entertaining the minute of the time they need
That's
for something.
think that's different.
You have a right to that bias. That bias is
that's
real.
bias.
That is
is
real.
I don't think that when I
You have to
say,
give everybody money that asks for it.
yeah, exactly. I'm not,
And Mark
I
feels the
don't do
same
that
way.
either.
Mark
Doesn't mean I
feels the same way,
disrespect them.
absolutely. Yeah, because people are like this, going like this, give me money, give
Yeah,
me money.
but you don't know who they are,
Mark
what they're
said,
doing.
"Go
yeah,
get a job."
implicit bias doesn't mean implicit bias doesn't mean that you have to give them what they want
Yeah.
or be their friend, like,
I don't
you know.
respect, giving them a little bit of time.
Yeah, they're people too, they're human.
I avoid eye
Yeah.
contact.
Criminals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you do realize that some of these corners that people sit on to beg money. They're corners, these people own these corners to do that, and they make $20,000-$50,000 a year sitting on a corner begging money.
They're not reporting it,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know, it's.
But I'll give you another example. Having somebody walk in that looks like an unhoused neighbor. And then everyone says, I'm just generally speaking. Oh, I'm too busy, I'm too busy, I'm too busy, I'm too busy. But if somebody helps that person and they have $1 million home they want to sell. Oh, right? Yeah. Guess what?
Ching.
I had that one morning. None of you are here. Somebody and that person is not here. That person walks in, "Oh, I don't want to work with that person, they're homeless." Walked away, I got to sit down. This person owned a lot of property, I sat with this person, gave this person respect. You know, did I have to do this? I wanted to, you know, did I have to do this? I wanted to, but I'm sitting there trying not to show facial expressions because we're an open door office.
But if they stink, they stink.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah, exactly.
I know one time I was at here's another bias. Okay, I was at a movie theater. We're sitting there and we have our pay ticket and we get there early enough to sit where we want to sit. Then the theater gets full. Somebody comes in and I said, I don't want that person sitting next to me. I don't want that person sitting next to me. And Mark says, stop it, stop it. I says, no, I can already smell him. And he says, stop it. And then the moment he came and sat next to me, I was like, oh. I said, stop it. And I said, then you sit next to him. You know, it was very bad. So do I have a bias? Yeah.
Well, implicit bias is not
Implicit
saying you're
bias.
supposed to
Right.
ignore your sensory.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's like your senses, so, yeah, like, we're not trying to take it too far here.
But do you
So-
recall when the manhole was changed to people hole?
Yeah.
That's when we knew we were in trouble. Now, let me ask you, Cindy, right now the master bedrooms are not called master bedrooms, they're called primary bedrooms. Do you foresee the education, master's, bachelor's degree name changing in the future as well?
Oh, I have no idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting, this cultural climate that we're in.
Slavery thing, issue,
Yeah.
master bedroom was not a slavery issue.
Okay, so when I was on the Tournament of Roses and I was a judge for the Queen and Court, my email says, glad to be of service to you. That's my general closer. So one of the princesses complained to her dad and says, I don't like Sylvia's email that it says glad to be of service to you. It's offensive because our president was Black. So you see.
Well, whatever, I mean, there's people who are easily irritated or
Yeah.
annoyed or easily bothered and.
Yeah.
So you
And-
mix for like the surveys master with the circular in the future.
You know, just be you.
Just be you,
Just
just
be
be
you.
conscious.
Best you can.
It's just for you to be more mindful, that's all. That's all. And we're very thankful to you, Cindy, for making us
Sure.
smarter and more aware and don't be scared, but
This is,
you
yeah,
know.
inviting, just conversation and self-reflection. So this is just a starter so that you can kind of think about these things, and
Yeah.
it's not gonna, world problems have not been solved right now today, so, but, thank you so much for your time and
Right,
listening.
thanks so much. Who would like Cindy to be featured as a speaker in the future again? I'm just joking, I'm just joking. Well,
Thank you.
thank you, Cindy.
Thank you. Yeah.